right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for staying put there. As you must have heard or seen over the week, 72 hours after the Canadians put out a statement indicating their intention to host the peace process between the Republic of Cameroon and Ambazonia. And just 12 hours after, the interim government came out and supported the Canadian initiative. Cameroon put out a statement, ladies and gentlemen, rejecting, but not just rejecting, indicating they have never contracted with anybody to negotiate between them and Ambazonia. What went on? What happened? When we first received briefings and invitations for the Canadian pre-talks, we were made to understand that the initiative was the effort of Cameroon's Prime Minister Yaounde after consultations, approval, and firm backing of Mr. Paul Biya, their president. Mr. Biya and PM Yaounde did not only agree on the mission, the Canadian mission, both equally agreed on who will facilitate the mission. Canada was going to be the country to make it to happen. The reason why Cameroon pulled out of the Swiss process. ABS was told that both Mr. Paul Biya and his Prime Minister Yaounde were agreed that a military solution to the conflict is nowhere in sight, that Cameroon was running out of funding, and that people are being killed in the thousands. The international community, it is said, wasn't going to sit idle and see Cameroon just pulled out of the Swiss process without alternative solutions to a settlement process. Based on this, Biya and Mr. Yaounde agreed that Ngote carry out consultations with the Canadian government to take up the initiative. Canada accepted, carried out consultations with Ambazonian stakeholders, and summoned the controversial pre-talks. The pre-talks led to the announcement last week of a formal negotiation process by the Canadian Foreign Minister. Here at the interim government of Ambazonia, we came out and endorsed the process, promising, unlike in the past, to engage the process. However, not up to 72 hours after the Canadian statement and barely 12 hours after this interim government promised to participate in the process, Cameroon leaders made a 360-degree about turn. In a statement issued by the Communication Minister, Rene Emmanuel Sadi, Cameroon totally denied, ladies and gentlemen, that they know of anything as a Canadian process, adding that at no time have they engaged any internal or foreign parties to mediate the conflict. Interpreted, this statement basically suggests that their Prime Minister, being the internal party here, and Canada, the external entity, were never instructed by their government or the government of Cameroon to initiate the process. Both the Prime Minister and the Canadians were essentially or are essentially thrown under the bus. This notwithstanding, after the Canadians issued the statement announcing the formal process, the Prime Minister's office alone went to work last Monday. His staff met in a conference trying to figure out how to manage the internal communication process for their own end. Mr. Yaounde Ngute, we are told, has audience with Paul Biya every Friday to brief him on the state of the government, that is, the Cameroon government. But because of the importance of the Canadian statement, Yaounde Ngute didn't want to wait till Friday to meet with Paul Biya. This was a matter of emergency, urgency. And so the meeting in his office on Monday, last Monday, had prepared a communication to the presidency on how he plans to communicate the Canadian process. And then he forwarded it by courier. He forwarded the communication to the presidency by courier. That was again on Monday. After Paul Biya or the president receives and approves of the communication plan from the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister, Yaounde Ngute, was then to hold a meeting with Rene Emmanuel Sadi, the communication minister, after which Sadi will then go out to formally acknowledge the Canadian process. But little did Yaounde Ngute know, he was acting all alone, on his own. Sources in Yaounde have told ABS that once at the presidency, the communication from the PM was intercepted by presidential staff loyal to Ferdinand Ngo. Furious that the Prime Minister Ngute was endorsing the Canadian process, Ngo confiscated the communication, the courier, and then hastily summoned a meeting with Rene Sadi, Paul Atanga, Felix Mbayu, and a few others, from which they crafted or drafted the communication that was read on radio and television in Cameroon, debunking the existence of the Canadian process. Our sources say that, of course, they were aware that the Prime Minister was following up the Canadian process. Ngo knew that. But what surprised them and led to the action they took last Monday was the fact that Ambazonian groups, particularly this interim government, threw support behind the process, the Canadian process, and a firm participation in aid. Our source said, and I quote, none of them ever believed that Ambazonia, so known for their divisions and competition, will accept to talk unconditionally anywhere with the Cameroon government, end of quote. The source added that Ngo, Atanga Nji, Mbayu Felix, and Rene Sadi do not want the war to be over. They don't want the war to end because it provides them money, power, and prestige. They are where they are because the war is going on. And the man who wants to spoil their business is Yaounde Ngute, and end of quote, our source said. When Yaounde Ngute sent his plan, the communication, to Itude, the presidency, at around 1 p.m. on Monday, it was intercepted by Ngo's men. Immediately, Ngo and his group went to work to prepare a new and a countermeasure that will end the project and prepare their own. At around 7 p.m. on Monday, theirs was being read on radio and television. And the PM, the Prime Minister Yaounde Ngute, we are told, was never informed. Yaounde Ngute is said to have met with Paul Biya today. We are yet to know about the outcome of that meeting. Two things are obvious here. Number one, Cameroon is more divided than Ambazonia. come to think of that, Cameroon in North Amazonia is running away from dialogue. But more importantly, the million-dollar question is, what is the international community going to do? Just ignore the intransigence of Cameroon, even as their soldiers kill and maim and decimate towns and villages in the southern Cameroons? The international community should stop talking and begin to act. Ukrainians are no more important human beings than southern Cameroonians. We are being killed in our thousands, but all the money and the ammunition go to Ukraine. When it concerns Ukraine, the international community sends money and arms. But when it concerns Amazonia, black people in Africa, I believe they say, let them kill themselves. We don't care, I guess, is the attitude. Talking about the highest form of hypocrisy, maybe. And that is my talking point on the subject of the Canadian process.